the other question that's totally aside from the conversation that we just had. I was watching another one of your videos the other day, and it I was meditating at night, and a thought just came to me. Like I was just running through the regular day, watching my thoughts as they're going by, and it was your video on about thinking of logical reasoning questions based on the arguments method of reasoning. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that and your thinking in that. You're the only person who I've really seen anywhere online say that, and it really interested me because it was a short video, but when the video was playing, it was going through everything and just like things were clicking in my head. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So let's say in logical reasoning, you've got the stimulus, you've got the question stem, and you've got the answer choices. And I could imagine, I don't know that they do it this way, but I could imagine theoretically that a person who writes LSAT questions, they could have a structure where one person writes the stimulus, not even knowing what question type it will be. Somebody else writes the question stem, somebody else writes the choices. I'm just making this up. But I think it's possible because any given argument that contains a gap, as pretty much all LSAT questions do, if they're arguments, they contain gaps where the evidence does not 100% guarantee the conclusion. There's room in between there where there's underlying assumptions or maybe flaws, depending on how you look at it. And so we could take any argument with a gap or a flaw and say, this could be a flaw question, or it could be a necessary assumption question, or we could be asked to strengthen it, or we could be asked to weaken it, or evaluate the argument. There are lots of things you can ask about an argument. If we're giving them the benefit of the doubt, in that gap, we could say, what's an underlying necessary assumption that is required in order for that argument to work? Versus, we are assuming this argument failed to consider something or is taking something for granted. And so what I'm saying is that there's room to play there, where let's say maybe you hate weakened questions, but you love strengthened questions. They're just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Supply information from one perspective and you're strengthening it. Flip it around and you're weakening it. So you're referring to my video on YouTube, by the way, titled 170 plus LSAT logical reasoning strategy, which is one of my more popular videos. And in that video, I give the example of Yelp reviews, right? So I'm saying that we should do that restaurant. After all, it has 5 stars on Yelp. So it would strengthen that argument if we knew that Yelp reviews were reliable, that Yelp is good at filtering out fake reviews or reviews from friends and family. You could weaken it if you supply the opposite, where you say Yelp reviews are not reliable. You could do the same thing with an argument based upon a study or a survey. If you say the study or survey is well conducted, you're strengthening it. If you're weakening it, you could say the study or survey was not well conducted. Or you could say the argument takes for granted that the study was well conducted. Maybe it wasn't. Or you could say the argument is assuming that the study was well conducted. Lots of ways to frame it with the exact same ideas. I'm thinking, for example, of a question I covered recently with a student that was about people eating fish and getting omega-3 fatty acids. And then we have an association between that and heart disease. I think this was from either test 80 or test 81, if anybody wants to look it up. And the idea was, well, there's a correlation there. Those who eat the fish tend to have reduced heart disease risk. Well, what if those are just people who are healthy in general and they also happen to exercise? Well, maybe exercising is the factor that is leading to reduced heart disease risk rather than eating the fish oil. And so you have to control for that. The study may not have been well conducted. And so we strengthen the argument if we say they controlled for that exercise factor. We weaken it if they say we failed to consider that. We say it's flawed if they failed to consider that. And necessary assumption, they are assuming that that was controlled for, that that's not an external potential alternative cause. So we're focusing on the method of reasoning in the stimulus and that gap, and we're dealing with the gap in a variety of different ways. This is regardless of question type, which means that sometimes the work is not to just drill necessary assumption questions. Sometimes the work is to better understand the stimulus. We were talking earlier about reading comp with Hanye. Rich was pointing out that just slow down, understand the passage better. And that applies here also. I'm saying understand the stimulus better, understand the method of reasoning better, understand the argument. If you do that, the question type may not even matter once you're at a certain point. You've been on the grind for like a month and a half, 8 hours a day or so approximately. You're probably beyond that. You probably know the different question types at this point if you've focused a bit on logical reasoning. It could just be you're getting questions wrong because they're hard questions with harder methods of reasoning in the stimulus, and that's what you got to look at. And that's why you got to dissect that better. When I talk about proper review, I talk about the Socratic review method, where you're really analyzing your thought process and seeing where your misunderstanding stems from. And it may not be question stem. It may be getting deeper into the method of reasoning in the stimulus. It may also be better understanding the answer choices and what makes them tempting, what makes them wrong, what makes right answers discouraging, and what makes them right. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.